This episode was made possible by our generous patrons.
Welcome to episode 141 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book
and then see the movie.
I'm James.
And I'm Luke.
And this week we discuss Barry Sonnenfeld's 1995 film, Get Shorty. So I had this weird feeling when we were reading the book. I felt like it was familiar in some ways, and I knew that I thought that I'd seen Get Shorty, the film. But come to find out, after watching this whole movie, I realized what I had seen is Be Cool, the sequel, I believe, to Get Shorty. So that's like where I was, because I could have sworn I've seen the movie with John Travolta, Danny DeVito, like I've seen the whole thing, but just never, I guess, realized that, Get Shorty was the first one. And I don't know. I think it's because I saw Be Cool when it came out. And
I think that's also a Elmore Leonard novel adapted.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it is fully adapted from his material again. That's crazy.
Yeah, we could potentially cover it at some point. I saw this movie a long time ago. I remember really liking it. I remember thinking it was really funny. Basically held it in very high regards. For the most part, I don't think it quite lived up to my memory of it. I'll be curious to know what you think of it. It wasn't bad. Mm-hmm. I think some of the shine wore off a little, and I think some of it hasn't aged particularly well. Mm-hmm. What was your general thoughts on it, though?
I mean, generally, I enjoyed myself. I actually had a really fun time with it, and I think what set me up for it was the book, and I think I knew what to expect in some ways. But really, I was impressed with the things that they leaned into. They really leaned into the performances of the actors. I felt like a lot of them had some very interesting, it was a meta story already, but then you take it and you actually make it in Hollywood. And it becomes even more meta because then you have some of the actors that are being spoken about actually starring in the movie, or at least cameoing. Like you said, there, certain things I didn't think really held up all the way, but I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, this was Travolta sort of at the height of his, maybe not the height of it, but he had a lot of his charisma and his gravitas, and he was starting to make that transition into sort of an action star, I think, around this time. So he, I think Face Off was around here too, right?
Yeah, I think after, but yeah, it would be the next thing. This was after Pulp Fiction, so that was the resurgence of John Travolta, the resurgence of his career after
because early on he had been
Grease,
known for Grease and doing dancing movies and stuff, right?
Some of that kind of stuff, yeah. The resurgence of him in Pulp Fiction, and I feel like it's hard to separate for some reason Tarantino in this movie. It keeps being a sort of common through line for me because I mentioned how the Elmore Leonard novel felt like a Tarantino story in our last episode, and then we came to find out that it was because Jackie Brown, which I had seen, is an Elmore Leonard novel, so it kind of the styles were getting merged a little bit. The sort of dialogue, the quippy dialogue that they're both known for.
Yeah, Elmore Leonard's known for his ear for dialogue, and that's something that people talk about with Tarantino as well. Is he's got this really engaging dialogue.
Yeah. I think one of the major things in this movie here that stands tall for me and still was great was the cast. The cast was amazing all the way through. I was surprised to see James Gandolfini.
Me
Hackman.
too, man. I almost fell off my couch when I saw that was James Gandolfini because I remember that character. I remember the bear. You know what I mean? And reading the book, I was like, oh yeah, I remember the bear in the movie. No fucking memory that was James Gandolfini, though. Completely did not know that. It was wild. And plus, he's got this long kind of mullety hair going on in the movie. Does not look like himself, in my opinion. Or at least how I'm used to him looking.
Exactly, yeah. And he would go on to do The Sopranos, which eventually, a career-defining role for him, which made him the go-to sort of mafioso mob boss
how
kind of
is
thing.
He in this movie that is dealing with all these gangsters and he's not a gangster? You know what I mean?
Right.
He's the.
But I think I loved his. That might be my favorite character, just in terms of relating to a character. He's a great character. He was good.
He's a great actor, and
absolutely.
And, I've liked him in everything I've seen him in, I think. And I remember going back and watching True Romance, which is a movie that I think is kind of underrated. I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember really enjoying him in that because he is sort of this side character who all of a sudden takes a pretty major role towards the end. and he's just terrifying in that.
Again, somewhat connected to Tarantino, and that was, I think I'm looking at it now. True Romance was 1993, which was just before this. Get Shorty.
Oh, okay, so that was before this. Wow, yeah. So he hadn't quite broken through to being like a main, but he was putting together good work. When did Sopranos start?
I think it's like 1999.
So it would take a few more years, but then he would have this, iconic role. And yeah, I mean, he's a great actor, and R.I.P. for sure. And a lot of this cast was really good. You got Gene Hackman in here.
I mean, Gene Hackman, just to speak to his stuff really quickly, like this is somewhat, it's against type. He would have other movies like his, when he would collaborate with Wes Anderson, he would have sort of his quirkier movies. Right. But this is, I don't know. This is one of my favorite Gene Hackman roles.
Unusual for him, right?
Very unusual. Very like he's like goofy and like off kilter and weird, and he's got so much character to him though. I don't know. I really
he's like a huge coward.
Yeah.
In like a really funny way. He actually might be my favorite character in retrospect. The more I think about it, like he's really good in this.
I mean, I got to give my props to Danny DeVito as well. National treasure.
Yeah.
Danny DeVito. Some protect him and someone make sure that he's safe at all times, because I love that guy.
Did you were you expecting Danny DeVito to be Martin Weir when you were reading the book?
I think so.
Did you really?
Yeah, because of the movie.
Because I had forgotten that was who Danny DeVito played. Like I said, it had been a long time since I've seen the movie.
Right.
And
I remember that he was Shorty.
When I was getting back into watching it, I was like, oh shit, Danny DeVito plays that guy. That's so funny.
And we just saw him in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest early in his career, and we're seeing him in the 90s here.
It's funny the crossovers we get.
His performance, I have to give the performance props, because in a meta way, again, is giving a performance. He's performing inside of a performance in this movie. And the way that he does, like he's doing like a bad performance while performing for someone while filming it for a movie, it's really, really good. Like I was like, God damn, Danny DeVito has some solid range, and I just thought it was really funny, and he's great.
And you're touching on a lot of great stuff in this movie, and I agree. I guess what didn't play as well for me now, where I'm at in life, was John Travolta the badass. And he can be a badass. Don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? Like I'm not someone who's going to sit here and say that John Travolta can't be a badass in a movie. He can, but something about his Chili Palmer performance, I don't know, he went to the well too often with the smoking and with the look at me line, and it kind of got a little silly to me after a while. And when I was younger and I saw this, I was sold. I thought he was the coolest fucking dude. I remember that. You know what I mean? That's one of the things I liked about the movie, but like this time it just didn't quite play as well for me.
Like I feel like there's something in the performance where it's meant to be funny as well. Like like he's supposed to be like the prototypical like try hard gangster or whatever he is here, and when he's doing that, I think he does it well. I do think that he took a lot of what he maybe picked up from Quentin Tarantino in Pulp Fiction, because there are similarities to the role. Like Vincent in Pulp Fiction is kind of a goofy.
He doesn't have that hair though, man. Vincent's hair is what makes it.
Right, but the goofiness, like the characters are like oddballs. Like they're weird, but they're also serious, and they're hitmen and everything like that. So it's like there's something similar there. Yeah,
I mean, other than his love of movies, he's pretty serious in this movie for the most part, right? Other than the fact that he's like this movie nerd. Right. He's not as much of an oddball as he is in Pulp Fiction, I guess. Yeah, that's true, for sure. But I think in like for us watching him, it's I don't know. I didn't take him seriously at all times. I guess Vincent to me always felt more like a real person than Chili Palmer does. Chili Palmer to me doesn't really convince me this is a real human being. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, which maybe you're right though. That's not the point. Maybe the point is to be kind of over the top. Like I said, this movie feels more solidly comedy. Did you pick up on that? Would you agree with that assessment? Yeah, I definitely felt that for sure. Yeah, and so maybe that's kind of still me trying to figure out how seriously to take it. You know? Right. I mean, even the violent scenes and anything that happens, any scuffles, they're all funny. They're all made to be funny, written to be funny. Oh well, yes. Everything with Ray Barboni for the most part is played for huge laughs, right? The nose, how he gets shot in the top of the head, like the scar he gets there. Part of his hair gets shaved off, right? And then you got like the way that ultimately the end of the movie ends with like sort of the stuntman having rigged the situation with the railing. Yeah. Which I guess we're going full spoilers, right? We should yeah. If that's not clear.
We should say full spoilers right here, but
it's an older movie. Most people have probably seen it if they are curious about it. If not, go check it out and come back. Sorry, we spoiled a little bit of it for you.
I want to talk about one more thing real quick with the comedy and the violence is when Chili throws Bear down the stairs.
Yes.
That's another moment of clearly like he's a stuntman. He throws him down the stairs. And, this all goes back to the text. This all goes back to Elmore Leonard. But just the way that it's shot, the way that it feels very much like a comedy moment. But it's also serious because lives are at stake potentially. People's feelings are getting hurt. Sort of gangster shenanigans are going on where, when a gangster's pride is hurt, you don't know like what they're going to do. You don't know if they're going to lash out in a way and like come back at you, which typically is the case in movies like this with this mafia stuff.
You highlighted that it was straight out of the book, and I think that was something I was surprised by. This is a really faithful adaptation. He switches a couple things around here or there. It felt like certain plot lines kind of maybe got more resolution to them than I remember in the book. But for the most part, like this was another situation where someone took the book and was like, "This is going to be basically the screenplay for this thing, and we're going to make it."
In my reading, I found out that originally they had sort of taken the dialogue and made it more, what Hollywood would consider palatable for the time, and leaned into sort of making it. I guess just took the dialogue and made it more typical, which when Travolta came on board, he was completely against and was like, we need to go back and put in all of the dialogue that Elmore Leonard had written, and I think rightfully so, because I think if you buy this screenplay, you buy this story, and you're going to adapt it. The main reason is to get the dialogue in there, and then like you said, when the dialogue is in there, it's nice to see it just adapted right onto the page. But did it always work for you? What did you think about that?
For the most part, yes. I guess I've started to change a little over time to where I start to crave a little bit more creative license to be taken at times. Mm-hmm. And we get a little bit of it, I think it ramps up more towards the end. So this was sort of a criticism that sort of disappeared by the end where we had some changes. But I remember early on thinking like, this is beat for beat. And it's probably only a problem that arises if you just read the book. You know what I mean? It's like super fresh in your mind like we do. I don't know. It's weird, though, because sometimes it can work. Like we talked about with Silence of the Lambs was almost beat for beat, yet is, fantastic. So it's tough to make any sort of blanket statement about like what the right thing to do is. I think it's very project dependent. But yeah, for the most part, I think it worked. I just, in the situation of having just read the book, I would have liked to see some of these scenes sort of, I don't know, reimagined in some way, but it would have to be in a good way. You know what I mean? You have to do it. You have to do it well.
Right. I think the idea to keep all of the dialogue, do all you can to do that, and then maybe switch up the scenes a little bit here and there. Yeah. I felt sort of what you felt as well. In the beginning, I was like, this is beat for beat, but sometimes, and in this case, it didn't really bother me. Honestly, I was like, I feel like I knew going in that it was going to be fairly faithful, and I was maybe surprised at how faithful it was, just in the fact that they did go in with all the dialogue. I thought it might have been changed, but decisions were made where that wasn't the case.
So while we're talking about performances, I want to shout out Delroy Lindo, who I didn't actually know his name. I had to look it up, but I've seen him in a lot of stuff, and I thought he was great in this movie, and he actually really brought something to this villain character, right? Like he I don't know, he just had such personality. He was more likable, I think, than the character in the book. Yet you still didn't want him to win. He was still a villain, clearly. But he really worked as that foil, right? Because you could see that him and Chili Palmer are after the same things, but it's their methodology, I guess, that separates them.
I felt that he was really intimidating. I felt like he was carrying that villain role. I also love, like you said, he's also kind of more likable too, and he brought some nice comedy. The stay off my carpet stuff had me every time. It was funny to me. It didn't get old. Like when they brought him in and there was like they were beating him up and there was potentially going to be blood. He's
expressive too. Like I feel like he had like a smile he'd give people, and like he was like charming in a way that. It was really, I don't know. It was a good performance. So I just wanted to shout him out. We're shouting out, standouts.
Yeah. And we might as well, while we're at it, talk about Dennis Farina, Ray Bones.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a
comedically
funny,
over the top.
He's got some comedic chops for sure.
But he does have the look of like a mafia. Like I think he's in Goodfellas. I'm pretty sure he's in Goodfellas. Or
is he really? Yeah, I could
think
see
he
it.
is.
And he can turn on the scary too, because I think there was his interaction with Zim, right? Like where all of a sudden you realize that Zim is in over his head, and he's like kills the guy and plants the gun on him, and you're just like, okay, this guy is dangerous, which right. I think you have to sell a little bit before him to get bested by a Chili Palmer later to have any meaning to it, right? Mm-hmm. Like he has to be sort of the final boss.
Let's also talk about Rene Russo. I was so happy to see her, and I like the idea of, the Scream Queens and someone wanting to be more than that, that attention being brought, especially during this time period. But unfortunately, it was in the text as well as the same kind of thing. Like there really wasn't much there. I would have liked to have seen more, especially with Rene Russo.
Well, she gets kidnapped in this version, right. And she's present at the end. So maybe I'll give them credit a little bit more in the film. Mm-hmm. But another criticism I have, and maybe it fits with the style of the movie, but it felt to me like their relationship was a little ham-handed, like a little. It was underdeveloped, and it was basically brought on by a music cue, which is like kind of a trope I hate. But if you really want to give them a lot of credit, it's like they're being really meta, like it's a movie, so we're gonna set up a romance with a music cue. And I'm talking about when she comes out on that like little like Juliet balcony or whatever you call it, and he looks up at her and you hear like this little bit of like a saxophone plays or something, and you're like, right. Oh, I guess he's into her now, and she's into him too, and then they are.
There is potentially my favorite part of the movie takes place between them. And it's the touch of evil reference that goes right. on. So
which that was fun because we went on another podcast, 33% Pulp, which I think might be defunct now, but you can still find those episodes. Or that episode. We went on and talked about this movie, and I was so surprised when I saw this. I was like, "Holy shit, I know this movie." Usually, when it's an old black and white film, I don't know it.
Right, and isn't it so fun to have everything click in? And like people who are trying to make movies, the movies that we look to. Typically, I would say as audience members, the people we look to who are making movies were inspired by these other movies. So like seeing someone inspired by Touch of Evil totally makes sense. And that's a monumental Orson Welles film, and the fact that people who are super into film would make that reference where he's like, Orson, he had the gun to his head, so he did his best work when he was under the gun. And all of that, and like it was true. I think I even brought that information to that podcast episode and said it, and
it was cool.
It was just so much fun to see the character sort of like saying the lines and being so into it and just loving it, especially for something like Orson Welles. And it's just filmmakers referencing filmmakers, which I'm always a fan of. I thought it was really cool. Yeah. And then to have the one of the most famous film noir endings with Dietrich walking off with the song playing, and then playing the song while Chili and Karen are walking down the street, I thought was amazing. And like as she gets into the cab and he sort of does the adios thing, it's so funny. It's such a well-crafted scene.
Yeah,
I love it.
You're right, and I guess that does bring it around a little bit because that was kind of a cool bonding over movies moment. He was like the most annoying person to have in a movie theater though while he was in there.
Right. Oh no, I wouldn't stand for it.
Literally quoting every line, like sitting behind you, like somebody like that. I would have to shush pretty
for sure.
vigorously.
Yeah, I can't stand people who talk in movies.
And then I did love how he like tapped the guy in front of him. He was like, "Oh, that's fucking good."
Wasn't
right?
that good?
At the end of it,
that I will say I've seen. Where everybody loved the movie at the end. Like on your way out, you just start talking to random people, and you're like, "How good was that?" Just
especially when you go alone.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. Like who else are you gonna talk to? That's funny. So before we get really into it, though, just because we're talking about their romance, one of the things that I continue to be sort of bemused by is how quickly Karen forgives Chili Palmer for breaking into her house.
Everyone forgets. Personally, even Zim, how they're just okay with it.
Well, it's not his house
so
at least,
absurd,
and he's a weird fucking dude. But Karen seems to be like, and he does it again later, and she's just like, oh, whatever. Right. But like fucking people breaking into your house, like that's not okay. I don't know. Like I would be way more upset than any of the people in this movie.
There were times in Hollywood's history where like the open door policy, people just walking into people's houses and things like that.
Yeah.
But like this is later than that.
And he's making this weird argument. Chili makes this weird argument. He's like, oh, your door was unlocked, so it wasn't really breaking and entering. It's like, yes, it is, dude. Just because it's unlocked, it's not an invitation to come inside.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that to me felt as dated and weird as him paying off a teenager to take a bag and go put it in a locker when he's in a fucking airport. Here,
Right.
take this bag. I was like, yeah, no way that's happening today. $10.
How innocent were we back then?
It's the 90s. Maybe he was like, whatever. You know, no one knew at least the crazy shit that was probably still happening.
So if you're ready, we can move into some background on the filmmaker and start to talk about some of the deeper plot here in a little bit.
Let's do it, man. I feel like I know next to nothing about Barry Sonnenfeld other than I think I've probably seen another movie by him, but I didn't look it up on purpose. So I want to learn about it on air.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have seen at least things that he was involved in. So
okay.
I know that you've seen some of this stuff. Here we go. Barry Sonnenfeld was born and raised in New York City. He graduated from NYU Film School in 1978. He started work as director of photography on the Oscar-nominated In Our Water, 1982. Then Joel and Ethan Coen hired him for Blood Simple. Amazing movie, by the way.
Haven't seen it.
This film began his collaboration with the Coen brothers, who used him for their next
two... I love the Coen brothers, though.
Yeah, I do. Do you say we or... You?
I love the Coen brothers, but yeah.
We sure do. We sure do. Who used him for their next two pictures, Raising Arizona and Miller's Crossing. Also amazing movies. He also worked with Danny DeVito.
Seen Miller's Crossing, but not Raising Arizona.
That movie's bonkers. You should definitely check that out. He also worked with Danny DeVito on his Throw Mama from the Train, 1987, and Rob Reiner on When Harry Met Sally in 1989, and Misery, 1990. And Misery, isn't that based on
Stephen King adaptation?
Yeah.
One of these days we're gonna cover that one. That's high on the list.
Now this is all so far him as a director of photography, and then he transitions into a director. Right. So Sonnenfeld got his first work as a director from Orion Pictures on The Addams Family, 1991, a box office success released in November 1991, followed by its sequel, Addams Family Values, in 1993.
Seen both of those. Grew up on those. Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, for sure, man.
And it's a very,
part of my childhood.
the tone of those and some other ones I'm gonna tell you can feel in this movie. He received critical acclaim for his fourth directorial effort, Get Shorty, 1995. Produced by Jersey Films and based on a novel by Elmore Leonard, the film won a Golden Globe for Best Male Performance. In 1996, Steven Spielberg asked him to direct Men in Black. Starring Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, the movie was a critical and financial smash. Producer John Peters then asked Sonnenfeld to direct Wild Wild West, an adaptation of an old TV series. He also directed the comedy Big Trouble in 2002, after which he made his most successful sequel, Men in Black 2.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen the Men in Black movies. I saw Wild Wild West. That's interesting. You know, it's kind of a mixed bag. It sounds like some real winners and some clunkers in there too. You've
got Elmore Leonard's source material in this movie, right? And I think the other things you can see, there are some stronger scripts and some weaker scripts. You know, Wild Wild West. Sure. I think everybody who's ever been involved with that admits that it's ridiculous. It was doomed to fail. It's like one of the biggest flops because of the budget of the movie at the time and everything, right. And it's just
didn't Will Smith choose that over doing The Matrix too?
I believe so. Yeah, I have heard that. So, I mean, that's Barry Sonnenfeld. I think you can kind of understand his style.
Interesting, man. I mean, I didn't realize Men in Black movies, I mean, those are iconic for sure. I didn't know this is the same guy.
Right. And, you know, like I say, I think there's a lot of Elmore Leonard in this film, but you can still sort of see the tone and his like brand of humor. It's not quite like fully goofy, but it's right there. It's definitely oddball humor type stuff. Yeah, and then more recently he's done Men in Black 3, and then he's directed episodes of a series of unfortunate events for Netflix.
Okay, which I haven't seen, but I saw the original film, and I know it is based off of a pretty beloved children's book series.
YA, children's, something like that. I read like the first 3 or 4, and I remember I had a lot of friends who were really into it growing up.
Yeah, I think I was a little old when they came out to where I wasn't interested in it. But I also was the kind of kid who like pretty quickly was already like, I don't read kid books anymore when I was young. It's the reason I didn't read Harry Potter, which we've talked about on our Harry Potter coverage.
Right. So, and as I said before, to tie it all back to Quentin Tarantino, I read that MGM executive's first choice to direct was Quentin Tarantino. Tarantino directed another film based on Elmore Leonard's novel called Jackie Brown. which we've talked about. But yeah, of course.
How about a Quentin Tarantino version of this movie would have been fucking something else, huh?
I mean,
he would have made some changes. I can tell you that much.
It's like, early Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and then he was gonna do his Vega Brothers film. This would have fit right along with a lot of that stuff in there. There's sort of your like gangsters.
Tone feels off though for him, so he would have had to change it.
The tone, yeah. Like, I think he would definitely.
It's too comedic for him,
right?
In some weird ways, he does comedy, but he's got that particular brand,
dark, like very unexpected, I would say, for the most part.
Yeah, the violence wouldn't have been as cartoony as it sometimes was in this.
Definitely,
that's for sure.
There would have been more squibs, a lot more squibs going on.
A lot more squibs, that's for damn sure.
So if you're ready, I think we should start to move into talking about the movie as a whole. We can talk about specific scenes, some changes from the book. We're not going to read a synopsis this time because our last episode is somewhat a synopsis of the same story. We'll talk about the changes, but it's so similar that we're not going to go scene by scene.
Sounds good to me, man. So I have some random observations that I made here that I want to touch on. One of them that I thought was some of the humor landed better in the film than it did in the book. One particular bit that I found really funny was all the discussion surrounding the screenplays. First off, how no one reads Mr. Lovejoy, I find hilarious. Well, especially Chili Palmer, but a bunch of other people also don't read it. Martin Weir, I think he reads Mr. Lovejoy, but then like they're all talking about this movie that Chili Palmer is describing, which hasn't even been written down. It's all just conceptual. I don't know. I thought like they were trying to say something about Hollywood, I think here, and how all these people are like falling in love with this script, with these different scripts, yet they don't even know what they are. It's all based off of just like hype and ideas. And
it has a lot to do with like, I know I've heard before that actors will go through and just like, what character am I being, cast for? What am I reading for? And only read their lines and see if there's a lot of substance there. And if there is, then, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they do in the movie. It just matters like, is there enough here to like, sink your teeth into?
And then you kind of take that and you have this conversation between Bo Catlett and Chili Palmer where they're talking about writing screenplays and the whole thing about commas, about how, you just write all your ideas down and then someone come in and put commas in, and if you get some tricky words in there, they'll figure out how they're spelled. And then he's like, I think I've read some screenplays where the words weren't even spelled right. And it was I just thought it was so funny.
Yeah.
I love it. It's like that's all that matters is getting the commas in the right spots and you'll be fine,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, everybody's met somebody who's like, I got a great idea for a movie. And it's like, maybe they do. And maybe they have a solid one that's all fleshed out.
And those were lines from the book. That's Elmore Leonard, who clearly knows, the value of writing, talking kind of about how people on the outside view writing, right? Like, this is clearly how it is. It's like, anyone can do it. Don't worry about it. You just got to get someone to come in and throw the commas in and you'll be fine.
Right. Well, like I said before, the idea that you as a producer, the nightmare scenario where somebody breaks into your house just to pitch you a story because they know they have the next great American movie idea, so they want to pitch it to you and everything. Like, it must be an everyday occurrence for like any big time producer. We're talking about producers and everything. Gene Hackman apparently based his performance on an agent he used to have who was like the most phony person he ever knew.
That was one thing that I wanted to get your take on for this, because this movie is skewering Hollywood in a lot of ways, right? Like, there's nobody here who's like making truly artistic things for the right reasons. Everyone's in it for the wrong reasons. Martin Weir is just like over the top narcissist. I mean, anytime if you ever walk into somebody's house and you see a painting of themselves on the wall, just fucking run. Because that person is out there. I mean, Donald Trump famously painting of himself. I mean, that should have been your first sign. But yeah, I mean, Martin Weir's got this giant fucking portrait of himself. He's got all these statues in his house, and he's so over the top, and then he clearly only cares about himself and his own ego, and that was true in the character in the book, but it just felt like they turned it up a notch or two for the film, in my opinion. And then you bring in Danny DeVito, and it becomes really, really funny, I think. It already was funny, but even funnier. But the whole point I was trying to get at is it felt like they were just really skewering Hollywood. And did you ever feel defensive watching this, or were you just like, fuck yeah, get him, dude?
I mean, I hold no allegiance to Hollywood itself. Like, I'm not like, I love Hollywood and the Hollywood system and everything. Like, for me, it's always been about the movies and the stories. Like, I'm not going to get defensive over something like that. Yeah. Like, I I think if it was attacking like storytelling, maybe I'd feel a little differently, but it's not. It's attacking a studio system that's pretty unfair in the first place. So I'm sure they can handle, taking a few hits here and there. It's these jokes are, based in reality sometimes. So definitely wasn't feeling defensive.
Okay, well, that's good, man. I guess I wasn't either, but I was wondering if you would feel that way, because it was like, I think also at the end, I think is to kind of spoil it a little bit, we transition into the movie we are watching is the movie that they've been talking about making. And it's signified when Harvey Keitel shows up in this, his really funny cameo.
Amazing cameo.
As Ray Barboni, right?
Yeah, in the book, it called for Harvey Keitel. They're like, oh yeah, Harvey Keitel.
And they even mentioned his name.
Is so great.
So, but that movie that they're making at the end, it's sort of a farce, right? Like it when he turns around, you have all, I think they're like stewardesses or something, or in these kind of skimpy outfits. And you see that the gun that Danny DeVito's character Martin Weir is holding is like really like weirdly shaped, and it looks like they're making it into like this really exploitative version of this movie. And I thought it was interesting because in the book, at the end, Chili Palmer sort of rejects that version of the movie by not having Martin Weir appear in his film, right? Like he decides to go a different way with it. And I guess it's unclear on whether or not it's going to get made, but whether or not it's going to get made, it's not going to have Martin Weir in it. Here, Martin Weir is the star, and he's doing his thing, and it felt like they were kind of saying, like, this is Hollywood, this is how these movies are, and I guess that was where I was wondering if it felt like, is that an indictment of Hollywood that you were willing to, like, kind of get behind, I guess?
Most people in the movie industry will be the first people to say like it's all fake. It's all, at least people who can take themselves seriously, people who aren't like, so narcissistic or up their own ass or whatever, can say like, it's not life or death. It's, we're doing it for art reasons. We're doing it for this reason. But at the end of the day, like it's all very fake. Everybody knows that it's all who everybody knows like, these people, some of these people maybe don't even deserve to be in these parts, but they do. And then, weird things happen sometimes when you put two people in a room with a camera. You can get some good chemistry, good performances. And I think that's what it's all about. I didn't really take it as, so with like sort of the stewardesses around and everything like that, you're just saying like it's so superficial, like just everything about it. No, I mean,
it just looked like the kind of movie they were making was like, I don't know, they weren't going for like full on comedy. Maybe it felt like there was no attempt at realism. Like he's holding this giant, like, futuristic-looking gun that doesn't even resemble a real gun. Like, it just was a bizarre film to be made about this situation, I guess. Maybe from, like, the writer's perspective that Elmore Leonard is, or I guess in this case the director, because this wasn't, it wasn't like it was from the book. Yeah. Maybe it's just this idea that, like, what audiences are interested in is usually weird and crazy and not expected, and so they do things that they don't even necessarily think is cool or right or whatever, just because they think audiences will respond well to it. ? Yeah. Well, and this is also a different era of filmmaking. And maybe that was kind of like the hot thing right then. I mean, we're in the middle of like over the top action 90s movies, right? I don't know. Yeah. And maybe he just felt like that was the pinnacle of the whole thesis of the movie, which is that Hollywood is superficial, it's full of criminals and crooks who don't care about the art. And, Chili Palmer is thriving in this situation, but that is still the situation. And like, you see the Bear is like working on it. You see Zim is directing it. Like it's all of our players are there, right? Right. It's all a small town. Everybody knows everybody. When push comes to shove, like, the big players all know each other. But yeah, this idea that everybody's crooks and everything like that, I think most people know that, there for every person that's, really into it for the art, that wants to tell the story, that wants to reach people, reach audiences, there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 people who are just interested in the fame or the money or the status and all that kind of stuff as well. So like, I mean, the thesis of the story. Well, and that reminds me, I wanted to say that I think that's the key difference between Bo Catlett and Chili Palmer that we're led to believe, at least, is that at the very minimum, Chili Palmer is a movie fan and he loves movies, and that's kind of why he wants to be in the movie business. Whereas it feels like Bo Catlett maybe he's a fan of movies, but he's in it for the status, right? Like he's in it for looking down at the pool. He's in it for wanting to be the man who has the respect of everybody in Hollywood. And so maybe they're trying to say like the motivations there, Chili Palmers are more, I don't know, authentic.
Or what like we as movie loving people would identify with or something like that. Like would hope that, even though he does all this bad stuff, it's all for the sake of the movies we love or whatever, it's crazy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, did the stuff with the bear, did that work better, worse, or the same for you? Because I know you liked it in the book. The way he sort of manhandles this stuntman and throws him around and stuff. How did that play?
So, I mean, like I said, I liked the character that Bear played in the movie. I think James Gandolfini brought a lot to the role. And I think that, instead of being this like really hard bodyguard that used to be a stuntman that we get in the book, I think in this version, he is sort of bumbling. And like the idea that he's a stuntman doesn't mean that he's a tough guy. And I think that was being said in Elmore Leonard's novel as well. But in this case, like he sort of has it's more of the comedic flair to it. So it plays maybe a little better. I mean, I liked it. Yeah, I thought it was fine. I think it's also really funny to me, like, to take John Travolta and put him in this role where he's super tough and he's going to throw people downstairs and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's in a comedy, so it's also, like, it's kind of funny that he's he's trying to be so serious in a movie full of people who are bumbling around and scared of him and that kind of thing. So it kind of makes the fact that he's so tough also a joke. Like, it's kind of funny to me. Like, I'm like, look how over the top he is. In the way that he's going about everything. It's just like, I don't know, I found myself just kind of like, ha, 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 ha. I would like, give a little chuckle here and there to things that weren't probably meant to be jokes fully.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I still have my same misgivings about it, just because he seems like that kind of guy wouldn't be so easily thrown around by Chili Palmer, but I was willing to suspend disbelief, I guess. Also, he's said to be like a champion bodybuilder. But, I mean, James Gandolfini is an intimidating guy, but champion bodybuilder, I don't know about that.
Maybe at one point, but yeah, not, at this point.
He's a big guy, I guess.
Anymore.
So, there you go.
I think the idea to have the bear, I think he had a daughter in the book as well.
Yeah,
but
he did,
the daughter really helped his character, especially in the movie, just like the representation of like how he was threatened by Bo Catlett to like continue working with him and all that stuff.
And they made a good, because I don't think that scene where he like sort of holds the daughter and kind of has a veiled threat about that.
Right.
When that scene happens in the movie, like it really signifies to me at least, like that's when the bear turns on him and is like, fuck this guy. I'm willing to kill him now. You threatened my child. You're done.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have some other just stuff that I read in my research, stuff that I'd love to talk to you about. One of the funniest things is when people in Hollywood first saw the billboard with Danny DeVito dressed up as Napoleon Bonaparte credited with Martin Weir's name, they thought it was a real one, and Danny DeVito might have changed his name. The film crew had to explain to residents it was just a prop in DeVito's latest movie.
So they put up the real thing in Hollywood, and people just drove by and saw it. That's funny. And of course he's playing Napoleon because he's short, I guess. I don't know. The whole get Shorty and like all the jokes about his height, I still don't find particularly funny. And it's interesting that the whole movie's named after it and the whole book's named after it. But it's okay, I guess. It's very 90s humor, right? Like make fun of somebody for being short. I don't know. I feel like we've kind of moved past that a little bit. Yeah, it's
a holdover from the book too. It's like I think if you change it, it fundamentally changes. Like you would have to change the name and change some of the details about the story. Yeah. And it stayed so true to the book that they had to stick with it. And I don't think it was really that funny that he was short or anything. Like it didn't play very, very funny to me anymore. I don't think we really touched on this one in our book episode, but I did read that Chili Palmer was loosely based on someone named Hollywood bookie Stan the Man. Atkins, a Detroit mob bookmaker who moved to Hollywood and became a producer. He was friends back in Detroit with novelist Elmore Leonard.
Wow, okay. So based off a real guy he knew?
Potentially based on a real guy. Something that I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
The title, which we also didn't talk about this because I think it's very specific to the movie stuff. The title Get Shorty from both the film and the book refers to Orson Welles' chauffeur, George Shorty Chiarello, that in part was recited by John Travolta's character from Wells' Touch of Evil. So apparently there's like a chauffeur or something like that was like famously
that's not what the title
Shorty.
He actually says when they're joking about what are they going to call the movie, he says Get Shorty.
Right, but I think that it was a potential reference to an Orson Welles movie like Elmer Leonard potentially was referencing an Orson Welles movie.
Because in the book he says get Martin. He doesn't say get Shorty. He jokes that they could call it get Martin, and then they change that to get Shorty in the movie. I thought to put like lampshade the fact that like that's why this movie's named that. They thought it was too subtle to not say it out loud.
Gotcha.
I never got the connection to the Orson Welles stuff. Maybe in like a roundabout way it is, but it just seems like a short joke to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know. It's just something I read, and some of the stuff could be incorrect. You know,
sounds like the kind of thing they're trying to do to like play it off, like, oh no, it's referencing an Orson Welles character.
Yeah. Don't you remember the famous Shorty character?
Yeah, come on. Our references are just too above you.
Well, speaking of references, this one I know for sure is real. As a nod to his short but memorable role in The Godfather, Alex Rocco, the guy who plays Ray Bone's boss, the guy who's laying down getting massage.
Oh yeah.
He's only seen in this film receiving a body massage in a similar manner as the character he played, Mo Green, in his final scene in The Godfather before he was assassinated.
Holy shit! I thought he looked familiar.
Yeah, remember the glasses get shot and blood squirts out? Yeah,
another project we've covered on Ink to Film. How about that? It's been a while, but yeah.
So like a full-on reference to The Godfather, because you know it's got this movie. The story clearly has its roots in you know mobster mafia,
gangster fiction
story. So to reference The Godfather is just like the ultimate movie reference there.
Mm-hmm. I should have kept my eye out for like oranges in one of the scenes or something. I should have been.
Yeah,
looking.
Honestly, there may have been like some oranges in there. Okay, so I did want to like loop back around to, you know, I talked about John Travolta made sure that the script had the lines from Elmore Leonard's novel. He gave an example in an interview that I wanted to give you, which I you know, he gives specific wording, which I think is important. And like, I know you're going to agree with me, but I mean, it's the fact that they changed it from what it specifically was, and then changed it back to Elmore Leonard's words, it totally made the movie probably.
Okay.
So here it is. John Travolta has said in interviews that he insisted the original Leonard dialogue be put back into the screenplay after it had been changed for the adaptation. In an interview, he gave an example. This is the line here. You see a black leather jacket, fingertip length, has lapels like a suit coat. You don't? You owe me $3.79. You get the coat back or you give me the $3.79. My wife paid for it at Alexander's. All of that is very specific, like quick dialogue, very conversational. In the screenplay, Travolta says the speech had been changed to, "Where's my coat? You better find it. It costs $400.
Oh, Jesus. Why?
And like coming from the actor who read the screenplay, that's scary. That dialogue could be at that point at any time in a screenplay's, you know, existence, like to where the actors are reading it.
Specific, interesting, colorful dialogue and change it to bland, boring shit.
Right.
Sure.
Where's my coat? You better find it. It's $400. Come on.
So bad.
It sounds so bad. So yeah, I mean, again, if Travolta, you know, is telling the truth here with the lines and everything like that, and that he got them put back in, that's a huge, you know, when he came to the project, he brought a lot of weight to it clearly, and like really changed the course of what would happen in this movie.
Interesting. They did change Travolta from being the one wearing the Lakers shirt at the end to having it be Karen wearing it. And I felt like the symbolic shift was instead the minivan. I think they moved it to be the minivan that he drives throughout. Like that's him symbolically changing his lifestyle and no longer being the true gangster. What did you think of that sort of like metaphorical shift and reshuffling?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the shift was less subtle in the movie because he out and out says it, right? Like and I think he does say something similar, but basically he's asked by Bones, like, you know, why are you here? Like, what are you doing here and all that? And he says like, I like it here. I'm going to stay here. And even though he's just saying that to Ray in order to kind of get him to like leave him alone or whatever, to me it also signified like he really does feel that way. And then like you say, eventually. I think to have it at the end of the book makes it more clear to the audience that like, oh, he's shifted, he's fully embraced it. But I think there was enough there for the audience to pick up on like, oh, he does like this area, he's going to stay here. But yeah, I think you could see the character arc more clearly if the last thing you see has some sort of representation of his new life.
Yeah, I thought it was notable that they shifted it, right, for whatever reason.
Right.
and it sort of became the minivan, right? Because at the very end of the final shot, he gets in the minivan to drive away.
Right. And but the scene overall also signifies like his new lifestyle as well. But yeah, jumping in the minivan, it's just so funny. The Cadillac of minivans or whatever, and like it just plays a part. And Danny,
and how Martin Weir's all about it.
Martin Weir wants to drive it around and everything. It's just like, what? This is like such a weird thing to key in on. But yeah, it's definitely a representation of like his past life and his new life, because it's like he's embraced, what this new world is like for him.
Oh, and shout out to our favorite lawyer from Jurassic Park, Martin Ferrero, if that's how you say that. I looked him up. Shows up, he's in the beginning of this movie. He's sort of Chili Palmer's friend who's with him at the barbershop and stuff. But this would have been right around the time of Jurassic Park. I think maybe a little bit after. This guy, I mean, I feel like I haven't seen him in many other films, but this is right around that time. So he looks just like he does in Jurassic Park, really.
It, like you said, I think Jurassic Park is 93 and this is like 95. So it's right after.
Yeah.
And like I totally noticed that as well, because that's my frame of reference for him when I see him. I'm like, like Jurassic Park, he gets eaten by the T-Rex when he's sitting in the the porta potty thing and
when you gotta go, you gotta go. Another Inktophone project back in the day.
Everything links itself together eventually. It's like
wild.
It's like Kevin Bacon, that's why everything's connected to Kevin Bacon as well. Everything eventually will be connected to Inktophone.
Yeah, it probably already is, honestly, but within a few degrees. Also, another just random scene that stood out to me. They're driving and Chili Palmer says to Harry Zim, "Look at me." And I was like, not the best idea to do when someone is literally driving. Like, Harry looks over at him, and I'm like, it'd be funny if he crashed into something right then.
Right. Yeah, the look at me thing, it worked. I think Travolta was able to do it how I kind of imagined. I thought it was funny. I don't know if this happens in the book in the same way. Does Zim use the look at me line?
No, see, I think that was something that was somewhat present in the book, but I think they played it up the way that Zim and Martin and like everybody started like quoting Chili Palmer because he was just so cool and like he had this way.
Well, Ray, like when Ray first comes to Hollywood, like it's kind of done differently. I feel like, right? Like when he first shows up, he confronts him in a different way and like tries to like mean mug him.
No, it is done differently because that whole confrontation is that's something they added, which I actually thought was the scene that really worked.
Right, because then we get him killing
the Harry Zim. Like that doesn't happen, I don't think, in the book.
Right, and I did think that worked really well. And you get a funny and good performance from both Gene Hackman and Dennis Farina. So if you're ready, I mean, I think we have to sort of come down on which is better here in a second. Do you have any other last minute things you wanted to talk about with the scenes or anything?
I just thought it was funny how half the time he says "look at me" to somebody, they're already looking at him.
Right.
And then they're like, I am looking at you, and he's like, I want you to keep looking at me, or I want you to look at my face, or something. I forget how he like qualifies it.
Well,
but
like when he's talking to Weir, and he's like, look at me. He's like, I am looking at you. He's like, no, look at me like I'm looking at you. And like, because he's trying to get him to do the.
God, and then the looks that Danny DeVito delivers are really good.
It's that scene is great too. The scene with the Touch of Evil, Orson Welles movie theater, all of that, and then the performance that Danny DeVito gives at his house, and then also when they meet for lunch or whatever, where he's like, Zim is all like in his cast and everything like that, and then Weir shows up and he's just ordering everybody a bunch of stuff they don't want, and then he leaves before it even gets there.
Yeah, so over the top, but classic, and good stuff. But you're right, man. We got to decide what was better, book or film, for this one. Do you want to lead off, or do you want me to go first?
I know where I land, so I think maybe you go first, because I've gone first a lot recently.
Okay. All right. I actually found this to be really, really difficult. This was one of the harder ones I've had to do lately. And it's not because both are without fault. I think both have problems. For me, at least. I think both have tons of merit, though. I mean, both really shine in a lot of ways. But in maybe a curveball for you, I'm gonna go with the book here. I gotta give it to Elmore Leonard. I was sort of expecting to like the movie more, just because the meta nature of a movie about making a movie and how it's kind of like recursive and all of that. And that was there and that was fun. But I think I was enamored with the style of Elmore Leonard and seeing him be a master of dialogue to where I can't overlook that. Like I really liked that part of the book. So for me, I'm going to go Elmore Leonard, but it is like a hair. It's right there for me.
Yeah, it's very hard for me as well. I kind of waffled. I went back and forth a little bit. I was like, well, okay, so which way do I want to go? I ultimately decided to go movie, but just barely. If there was going to be a time that I was going to go book, I almost nearly went book. I think the only thing that puts it over the book for me is, for one, the stuff that I loved in the novel, they kept. Elmore Leonard's dialogue stays pretty much untouched and is in this movie. And then you get some performances from some actors that I love. And I think it was a really strong cast. Like I said, I think that's the biggest thing that I liked from this movie is the cast and the performances. And seeing people play against type, seeing James Gandolfini in sort of a funny yet still menacing role.
Yeah.
Gene Hackman as like, he's the ultimate sort of like tough guy badass in certain movies. And then you're seeing him as like this meek, like sort of goofy and funny screenplay or producer. So I really, really enjoyed the performances. But like you say, it was by a hair. I almost, even right now, I almost went book. I almost said book.
Yeah, that's funny, man. I think for me, you almost convinced me to go movie with this conversation, because I had written down, I'm going book this time in my notes, but I thought about changing it on the fly, because I feel like talking over the movie with you has really sort of, I guess I'm not as like into all these different actors and like the stuff they usually do and how against type they were and all that stuff. And I appreciate that more, I think, now after talking with you. So it's tough, man. But I like the idea of this being sort of a split decision for us, as much as that might be like lame to people. I don't know. We're not going to force ourselves to choose to like come together. We're just going to say split decision for us, right down the middle. We don't have a guest to break the tie.
In the same way, as you were answering, I found myself thinking about on the fly trying to change my answer to book, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick with movie. Like I felt the same pull. I felt the same pull though, because Elmore Leonard this is Elmore Leonard's story.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like he wrote this whole damn thing for the most part.
I think Sonnenfeld has less to do with the success of the story than Elmore Leonard is, which is why it's so tough for me, because like I said, the performances and the cast are there, and like seeing it on screen and the referential, having that Harvey Keitel cameo is worth the price of admission. That was amazing.
Funny. Yeah.
So funny, because he's literally called out by name in the book. So it's really fun and interesting to see sort of Hollywood snake eat its own tail and everything like that.
Yeah. I think they get way more into that with Be Cool, if I remember correctly. Like it really gets into that Hollywood stuff, but it's been a while since I've seen that one too. It must have been more recent, but I feel like I don't remember much about that movie, so I'd be curious to watch it again. If you're a fan of this and you would like to hear us talk about Be Cool, let us know. We're probably not going to cover it right away, but we can put it on the list, and it could be something we can get to at some point. Because this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Oh, and shout out to Jamie D, the patron who commissioned this project. Over on our Patreon, she is at the Jukebox Hero level, where you can get tokens to unlock projects and basically force us to cover them. Shout out to her, been a long-time supporter. Hopefully she enjoyed this coverage. And if you're curious about our Patreon, we also have bonus episodes released monthly on there. Go to patreon.com/inktofilm to find out more.
And thank you again to Jamie D. Please make sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all of those at Ink2Film. And be sure to join the Council of Inklings, because we post polls for upcoming projects. We post news about any adaptations we see coming up. Anything that we see that's interesting that's sort of in the adaptation or books or movies realm, that field, I would say we post in there. So make sure to stay connected and, continue the conversation online.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. Like, what was better, the book or the movie? I'm always curious to get data points, because you'll see people like vastly different opinions. Oh, this was way better. This was way better. It's always fun to see. And this time there's a little bit of fodder for each side, I guess, in this podcast. If you liked this episode, please let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever podcast app you use. Helps get the word out, helps boost us in the ratings, and get more people to discover us. Okay, so I think it's time to sort of wrap it up here, but we do want to announce our next project.
and I'm really excited for it. It is If Beale Street Could Talk, the book and the movie, written by James Baldwin and directed by Barry Jenkins. If you've seen Moonlight, I'm sure everyone knows who Barry Jenkins is right now. A great voice in cinema, and I'm excited because this is a movie I actually missed when it came out, and I heard great things about it. We both talked about Watchmen, and we watched the HBO series. Regina King was in that, and she was, I think, nominated, maybe even, I think she may have won Best Supporting Actress for this role in this movie. Wow. So it's one that I've wanted to see for a while.
Yeah. It's one I honestly don't know much about. The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm excited because it's recent, and honestly, it felt like time to get into a project like this for our podcast. So we'll talk about that more next episode. Hopefully you'll join us, and until next time,
thanks for listening.